The sky splits open with a crack of thunder, and for a moment, the world holds its breath, because when gods walk among mortals, nothing is ever the same again. Picture this: towering figures wreathed in lightning, their voices shaking the earth, their love and wrath rewriting the fate of nations. These are the stories that birthed civilizations, the divine dramas whispered around ancient fires, carved into temple walls, and passed down through generations like sacred heirlooms. From the sun-scorched deserts of Egypt to the misty fjords of Scandinavia, every culture has its own pantheon of deities, each tale more epic than the last. And today, we're setting sail on a journey to uncover 25 of the most astonishing myths ever told, stories of creation and destruction, love and betrayal, power and sacrifice that still echo in our hearts today. Think about the last time you looked up at the stars and felt that tug of wonder, that sense that there's something greater, older, infinitely mysterious just beyond your grasp. That's the magic of mythology. It's not just about explaining how the world began or why storms rage. It's about us, our fears, our dreams, the battles we fight, and the secrets we keep. When the Greek hero Perseus slays Medusa or the Mesopotamian goddess Inanna descends into the underworld, they're not just adventures, they're mirrors reflecting the human experience in all its raw, messy glory. These gods and goddesses, they laugh, they scheme, they make terrible mistakes. They're as flawed as we are, and that's what makes their stories unforgettable. So why do these ancient tales still matter? Because they're the roots of everything: our art, our literature, even the way we understand right and wrong. They've inspired empires and revolutions, given courage to the lost and comfort to the heartbroken. Over the next 25 stories, we'll meet deities who shape shift, tricksters who outwit fate, and lovers who defy death itself. We'll watch as Odin trades an eye for wisdom, as the Hindu goddess Kali dances on the bones of demons, as the Aztec feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl gifts humanity with fire. This isn't just a list, it's an invitation to stand shoulder to shoulder with legends. Ready to begin, the first story starts where all things do, in the darkness before time. Before the gods of Olympus ruled the heavens, the world groaned under the iron grip of the Titans, ancient beings of raw, untamed power. Their king, Cronus, sat upon a throne forged from fear, swallowing his children whole to prevent the prophecy that one would overthrow him. But in the shadows, his wife Re plotted. When her sixth child was born, she wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and tricked Cronus into devouring it instead. That child, hidden away in a cave on Crete, was Zeus. Nursed by the goat Amalthea and raised in secret, he grew strong, his very presence crackling with the promise of storms. The day came when Zeus confronted his father, forcing him to vomit up his swallowed siblings Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, now fully grown and hungry for vengeance. What followed was the Titanomachy, a war so colossal it shattered mountains and boiled seas. The Titans hurled entire islands like stones, while Zeus unleashed his newfound weapon, the thunderbolt, forged by the Cyclops as a symbol of his divine right. For 10 years, the earth trembled under their battle until at last the Titans fell. Zeus cast them into Tartarus, a prison so deep even time struggles to reach it. But victory demanded balance. With his brothers, Zeus divided the cosmos like kings carving a map. Poseidon took the oceans, Hades the underworld, and Zeus himself claimed the sky and the title of King of the Gods. Yet his rule was never absolute. The Olympians whispered, schemed, and occasionally rebelled, forcing Zeus to wield both thunder and diplomacy. His story isn't just about power, it's about the chaos of succession, the weight of leadership, and the irony that the god who overthrew a tyrant would spend eternity fearing the same fate. Every bolt he hurled was a reminder, even gods are bound by the cycles they create. Zeus may have ruled the heavens, but his heart was as restless as the storms he commanded. Time and again, the king of gods found himself drawn to mortals and nymphs, his passions igniting scandals that rippled through mythology. Take Europa, a Phoenician princess who caught his eye one morning as she gathered flowers by the sea. Transforming into a magnificent white bull, Zeus knelt at her feet, his coat gleaming like polished marble. Enchanted, Europa climbed onto his back only for the bull to leap into the waves, carrying her across the ocean to Crete. There he revealed his true form, and their union would birth 3 sons, including Minos, future king of Knossos and judge of the dead. To the ancients, this wasn't just a love story, it was an explanation. Why did Greek culture flourish on Crete? Why did Phoenician traders speak of kinship with distant shores? The myth wove together geography, politics, and the divine in one sweeping tale. Then there was Leda, the Spartan queen, whose encounter with Zeus took a far more surreal turn. Disguised as a swan, the god sought refuge in her arms as if fleeing a predator. Their brief union produced 2 eggs, one yielding Helen, whose face would launch 1,000 ships, and Clytemnestra, who would wield a bloody axe in Mycenae. Here, the myth becomes a haunting mirror. Helen's beauty sparked war, while Clytemnestra's vengeance exposed the cost of betrayal. Zeus's dalliances weren't merely escapades, they were seeds from which epic tragedies grew. But no legacy of Zeus burned brighter than that of Heracles, born from his affair with the mortal Alcmene. Hera, Zeus's vengeful wife, hounded the hero from his cradle, sending serpents to kill him as an infant. Yet Heracles strangled the beasts with his bare hands, a sign of things to come. His trials, from slaying the Nemean lion to capturing Cerberus, weren't just feats of strength. They were proof that even a demigod could suffer, could atone, could rise. Through Heracles, Zeus gifted humanity something rare in mythology, a hero who earned immortality through grit rather than birthright. These stories reveal a paradox. Zeus's infidelity often brought chaos, Hera's wrath, wars, monstrous offspring. Yet from that chaos sprang civilizations, art, and even the stars themselves. Callisto, transformed into a bear and placed in the heavens as Ursa Major. Perseus, conceived in a shower of gold, whose descendants would include Helen and Agamemnon. Time and again, the gods blurred the line between passion and punishment, desire and destiny. To ancient audiences, these myths weren't just entertainment, they were a way to explain the unexplainable. Why does the swan constellation glide across the winter sky? Why do Cretan ruins whisper of a lost golden age? Every tale was a thread in the tapestry of their world, woven by the hands of gods and mortals alike. Yet Zeus's legacy isn't just in the heroes he sired or the constellations he painted across the heavens. It's in the raw, unfiltered humanity of these stories. Here was a god who could hurl thunderbolts yet couldn't resist a pretty face, whose power was absolute yet whose heart was hopelessly mortal. In the end, Zeus's greatest contradiction might be this: the king of Olympus, forever bound by the very desires he could never control. High above the frozen realms of Midgard, where the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil claw into the fabric of existence, Odin the All-Father made a choice no other god dared. Wisdom in the Norse cosmos wasn't a gift, it was a prize wrested from the jaws of sacrifice. Picture him there, his cloak tattered by the winds of 9 worlds, staring into the black waters of Mimir's well where all knowledge swirls like ink. The price, a single eye, the cost of drinking from the well's depths, but Odin didn't hesitate. He plucked out his own eye and cast it into the void, trading sight for insight, vision for vision. The well's guardian, Mimir, the decapitated sage whose head still whispered secrets, granted him sips of water so potent they seared the runes of destiny into his bones. This was no fleeting bargain, it was the moment the god of war became the god of wisdom. Yet his torment had only begun. For 9 nights, Odin hung himself from Yggdrasil's branches, a spear gashing his side, his body swaying between life and death like a corpse on the gallows. No food, no drink, just the slow drip of his blood watering the roots below. Why? Because the runes, the ancient alphabet of creation, refused to be mastered without suffering. They burned themselves into his mind only when his agony mirrored the anguish of the world itself. When he finally fell from the tree, gasping and reborn, the runes weren't just symbols, they were weapons. With them, Odin could weave spells to calm storms, raise the dead, or paralyze armies mid-battle. But here's the twist: Odin's hunger for knowledge wasn't noble. It was desperate. He'd seen the future, the doom of Ragnarok, where gods would die and flames would swallow the heavens, and he needed every scrap of wisdom to delay it. That's why he stalked battlefields not just as a war god, but as a collector of the dead. His ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, scavenged minds instead of flesh, whispering secrets from corpses into his ear. Even his hall, Valhalla, was a grim strategy, an army of slain warriors stockpiled for the final battle. In Viking lore, this duality made Odin relatable. Farmers prayed to Thor for rain, but kings and outcasts sought Odin, the god who gambled everything for understanding. A wanderer with one eye gleaming like a coin in the dark, he'd knock on mortal doors disguised as an old man, testing their hospitality with riddles that could lead to riches or ruin. His very presence blurred the line between blessing and curse. To know too much, as Odin proved, was to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, to see the threads of fate but never be able to cut them. So next time you hear the rustle of raven wings or feel the ache of an unsolved riddle, remember, even gods must bleed for answers. Odin's missing eye isn't just a wound, it's a reminder that true wisdom costs not in gold but in pieces of yourself. And sometimes the Allfather whispers that's a price worth paying. The Nile has always been more than a river, it's the lifeblood of Egypt, carving hope into the desert with every flood. But when its waters ran red one fateful year, the people knew something was horribly wrong. Their benevolent god, King Osiris, who taught them to farm and build, had been murdered by his own brother Set, the storm god of chaos. Set's jealousy festered like a wound, and his revenge was as brutal as it was cunning. He tricked Osiris into lying inside an ornate chest, then sealed it shut and hurled it into the Nile's currents. The box drifted far from Egypt, washing ashore in distant Phoenicia, where a tamarisk tree grew around it, swallowing Osiris's body whole. But the story doesn't end there, because Isis, Osiris's wife and sister, refused to let death have the final word. With wings like a falcon's, she soared across kingdoms, searching for the chest. When she finally found it lodged in the trunk of that foreign tree, she split the wood open with her bare hands, and her wail shook the heavens. Yet Set wasn't finished. He stole Osiris's corpse, slicing it into 14 pieces and scattering them across Egypt like seeds of despair. Isis, though shattered, became something more than a goddess. She became the first detective, the first healer, the first to defy fate itself. With her sister Nephthys and the jackal-headed Anubis, she hunted every fragment of Osiris's body. Wherever they found a piece, they built a shrine, turning betrayal into sacred ground. But one piece was missing: his phallus, devoured by Nile fish. Undeterred, Isis fashioned a replacement from gold and whispered spells so potent they stitched flesh to magic. This wasn't just resurrection, it was the birth of mummification, a ritual that would define Egypt for millennia. Wrapping Osiris in linen, she fanned him with her wings, pouring life back into his lungs just long enough to conceive their son, Horus, the living heir to Osiris's stolen throne. What follows is more than a family feud, it's the first courtroom drama in mythology. Horus, the falcon-headed avenger, challenged Set in an 80-year battle of wits and claws. The gods themselves became jury, debating who deserved to rule: Set, the strong but treacherous uncle, or Horus, the rightful heir, mutilated in battle. Set tore out his eye, which Thoth later restored, making the eye of Horus a symbol of healing. The trials were as vicious as they were absurd. Set turned into a hippopotamus to sabotage Horus's boat. Horus retaliated by, let's just say, the ancient texts get creative. In the end, Horus won, proving that even in a world of gods, justice could prevail, but never cleanly, never without scars. The genius of this myth isn't just in its drama. Osiris, now lord of the underworld, became the hope of every Egyptian, proof that death wasn't an end but a passage. Farmers saw Osiris in the sprouting grain, mothers saw Isis in the stars guarding the night. And Horus, he was the promise that no tyrant, not even a god, could rule forever. When pharaohs took the throne, they didn't just claim power, they became Horus incarnate, inheriting a story as old as the Nile's mud. So the next time you see a mummy in a museum, remember, those wrappings aren't just linen. They're the echoes of a goddess's love, stitching broken things back together against all odds. Imagine a world where the sun simply vanishes. No dawn, no dusk, just an endless midnight smothering the land. That's exactly what happened when Amaterasu, the Shinto sun goddess, sealed herself inside a cave after her brother Susanoo, the storm god, pushed her too far. His crimes started as petty pranks, ruining her rice fields, flinging a flayed horse into her sacred weaving hall. But the final insult came when he hurled the carcass of a heavenly pony through her roof, killing one of her maidens. Amaterasu's rage didn't erupt in fire, it folded inward like a dying ember. Wrapped in shadows, she retreated into the Ama Noe Wato, the heavenly rock cave, and the world plunged into darkness. Crops withered, demons prowled openly, and even the gods shivered in the cold. The celestial court panicked. Without Amaterasu's light, the rhythm of life itself unraveled. They needed a plan, not force, but cunning. Enter Usium, the goddess of dawn and revelry, who hatched a scheme so audacious it could only work on a deity's pride. Outside the cave, she overturned a wooden tub, stomping on it like a drum while the other gods cheered as if at a festival. Then Usium began to dance, her movements growing wilder, her robes slipping until the assembly roared with laughter. Amaterasu, fuming in her cave, heard the commotion. Curiosity prickled at her. Why weren't they mourning her absence? Peeking out, she demanded to know what was so amusing. "There's a goddess among us more radiant than you," Usium lied, gesturing to a mirror the gods had hung on a nearby tree. When Amaterasu leaned closer, she saw her own reflection, but didn't recognize it. The mirror, crafted by the divine smith Ishikorodome, captured her brilliance so perfectly that for a heartbeat, even she was dazzled. In that moment of distraction, the gods yanked her from the cave's mouth while a sacred rope barred re-entry. Light flooded the world again, and life surged back. But this myth isn't just about celestial drama. Amaterasu's return is woven into Japan's very identity. The mirror, along with a jewel and a sword, the three items used to lure her out, became the imperial regalia, symbols of the emperor's divine right to rule. To this day, the Ai's grand shrine, her sacred dwelling, is rebuilt every 20 years in an eternal cycle of renewal. And Usium's dance, it's considered the origin of Kagura, the ritual performances that honor the gods. The story's genius lies in its layers. Amaterasu isn't just the sun. She's the soul of Japan, capricious yet vital, wounded yet resilient. Her retreat reflects the winter solstice, her return the rebirth of spring. And that mirror, it's more than a trick. In Shinto belief, it's a tool of truth, revealing not just appearances but essence. When Amaterasu saw herself anew, she reclaimed not just the sky but her purpose. The tale whispers a profound lesson. Sometimes even gods need reminding of their own light. Thor wasn't known for subtlety. When the thunder god decided to go fishing, he didn't reach for a mere hook and line. He demanded a ship strong enough to weather the end of the world and bait worthy of a serpent that encircled the earth. This wasn't a leisurely pastime, it was a duel with destiny itself. The Midgard serpent Jörmungandr lay coiled in the ocean's depths, so vast its body could loop around the entirety of Midgard, its tail clenched between its teeth like a macabre bracelet. The prophecies were clear. When that grip loosened, Ragnarök would begin. But Thor, ever defiant, aimed to rewrite fate with his bare hands. he enlisted the giant Hymir as an unwitting accomplice, rowing them far beyond the safety of coastal waters. Hymir, no fool, shuddered when Thor slaughtered his own ox to use its head as bait. The giant's dread only deepened as the line snapped taut, the sea frothing like a boiling cauldron. What surged from the depths wasn't just a fish, it was a nightmare given scale. Jörmungandr's jaws gaped wide enough to swallow mountains, its venom dripping like acid into the waves. Thor's muscles strained as he hauled the serpent toward the surface, his feet punching through the boat's hull with the force of their struggle. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Lightning crackled in Thor's free hand, poised to strike until Hymir, terrified of unleashing doom early, severed the line. The serpent plunged back into the abyss, but not before locking eyes with its fated killer. This wasn't just a failed hunt, it was a glimpse of the inevitable. Norse myths thrived on cyclical doom, and every detail here foreshadowed Ragnarok's final battle. Thor's fishing trip mirrored the apocalyptic duel to come, where he'd finally slay Jörmungandr only to stagger 9 steps before succumbing to its venom. Even the broken boat echoed the shattered wreckage of Naglfar, the ship of dead nails that would sail in the end times. Yet there's irony in Thor's brute force approach to destiny. The gods knew their fates were sealed, but they fought anyway, not to win but to affirm their defiance. Thor's fishing trip wasn't just about testing his strength. It was a declaration that even in the face of certain doom, a god could still spit in death's eye. And that's why this tale resonates. It's not about victory. It's about the audacity to pull the apocalypse up by its fangs and stare it down, if only for a moment. The Acropolis loomed over Athens like a silent judge, waiting to decide which god would claim the city's devotion. Poseidon struck first, his trillion splitting the rock with a thunderous crack, but instead of life-giving water, only a briny spring gushed forth, its taste mocking the thirsty land. Then came Athena, her grey eyes calm as she knelt and planted something in the cracked earth, an olive sapling. Its roots curled deep, its branches heavy with fruit that meant oil for lamps, wood for homes, trade for generations. The choice was unanimous. Athens would bear her name, and Poseidon's fury would echo in the tempests he sent to batter her shores for centuries. This wasn't just a divine popularity contest. The myth carved into the Parthenon's pediments revealed the Greeks' deepest values. Athena's gift wasn't flashy, but it sustained civilization. Where Poseidon offered raw power useful for naval dominance, yet useless without Athena's wisdom to build ships, she gave technology and diplomacy. Their rivalry birthed the city's soul, a balance of might and intellect, salt and oil, storm and strategy. Half a world away, another battle raged, one where negotiation wasn't an option. The buffalo demon Mahishasura had sworn no man or god could kill him, and for years his tyranny went unchallenged. The Hindu pantheon, desperate, pooled their divine energy into a single blazing form, Durga the Invincible. 10 arms wielded swords, arrows, and a noose forged from cosmic wrath. Riding a lion into battle, she didn't just fight Mahishasura, she dismantled his illusions. When his shape shifted from buffalo to elephant to warrior, Durga matched him, her foot finally pinning his throat as she speared him through the heart. The parallels are striking. Both Athena and Durga embody strategic brilliance, but where Athena's victory was civic, Durga's was cosmic. Her 9-night war, celebrated as Navratri, isn't just about slaying a demon, it's the eternal struggle between order and chaos. Every autumn, devotees reenact her triumph through dance and fasting, symbolizing the inner battle against ego and ignorance. Yet the contrasts reveal each culture's heartbeat. Athens prized the olive's slow growth. India revered the moment when negotiation ends and the lion must roar. Both goddesses remind us true power isn't just about winning. It's knowing whether to plant or to strike, and doing either without hesitation. Niame, the sky god, owned all the stories in the world, and he wasn't sharing. Locked away in his golden chest high above the clouds, these tales weren't just entertainment. They were wisdom, history, the very threads that wove the Akan people's understanding of life. But Anansi, the sly spider, saw an opportunity where others saw impossibility. He didn't have strength or wings, just a mind that spun traps as deftly as his webs. When he climbed to Niam's court and demanded the stories, the god laughed until Anansi proposed a bargain. "Give me 4 impossible creatures to capture," he said, "and the stories are mine." Niam, certain of failure, agreed. First came Osibo the leopard, whose claws could shred a man like parchment. Anansi dug a pit, covered it with leaves, and filled it with the scent of roasted yams. When Osibo tumbled in, the spider dangled a rope. "Let me help you," he crooned, weaving the fibers into a net as the leopard climbed, only to find himself trussed like a market chicken. Next was Mabro the hornet, whose swarm could strip flesh from bone. Anansi filled a gourd with water, poured it over a banana leaf above their nest, and whispered, "Isn't it wiser to shelter inside?" The hornets buzzed in, and he corked the gourd with a single swift motion. But the real masterpiece was Onini the python, longer than a river bend and twice as deadly. Anansi staged an argument with his wife, Aso, loud enough for the serpent to overhear. "You say he's shorter than this palm branch," Anansi hissed. "Prove it." Onini, too proud to ignore the insult, stretched out beside the branch and let Anansi tie him to it, just to be sure. Last came Mosha the fairy, invisible except for her laughter. Anansi carved a wooden doll, smeared it with sticky sap, and left it holding a bowl of yam paste. When the fairy reached to eat, she stuck fast, her magic useless against simple trickery. Niam had no choice but to surrender the chest, but here's the twist: Anansi didn't hoard the stories. He spun them into webs and let the wind carry them down to every village, so even the smallest child could learn how the tortoise got its cracks or why the moon hides behind clouds. That's why West African folklore brims with spiders, not as villains but as teachers. Anansi's genius wasn't just in outsmarting the strong, it was in understanding that stories only grow when shared. His legacy, a world where the weak could outthink the mighty and wisdom belonged to anyone clever enough to listen. The tale isn't just about mischief. It's a celebration of intellect over brute force, a reminder that the marginalized can rewrite the rules. Anansi's webs didn't just trap prey, they connected people, cultures, and generations. So the next time you hear a folk tale, remember, it might just be a thread from the spider's loom, lingering in the air like a whispered secret. The air in the ancient city of Tolan hung thick with the scent of burning copal as Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, the morning star, the god who shaped humanity from bones and blood, stood at the brink of his own undoing. The Aztecs told of a time when the world lay shattered after 4 failed suns, when the gods gathered at Teotihuacan to sacrifice themselves and spark the 5th age. But Quetzalcoatl's most harrowing trial wasn't in the heavens. It was here, among the ashes of his own glory. Long before his fall, he'd performed the unthinkable, descending into Mictlan, the underworld's deepest level, to retrieve the bones of a lost humanity. The Lord of Death, Mictlantecutli, agreed to surrender them, but only if Quetzalcoatl could circle the underworld's 9 layers while blowing a conch shell with no holes. Ever the trickster, Quetzalcoatl summoned worms to bore through the shell and bees to swarm inside, creating a haunting drone that echoed through the abyss. Yet as he fled with the bones, he stumbled, scattering them. Undeterred, he gathered what remained, slashed his own flesh, and let his divine blood drip onto the brittle fragments. Where his blood touched bone, living humans rose not as slaves, but as beings bound to the gods by sacred debt. Yet even deities have weaknesses. For Quetzalcoatl, it was Teotl the fermented agave nectar his enemies called pulp. His rival Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror god, exploited this flaw cruelly. Disguised as a physician, he offered Quetzalcoatl a tonic to ease his grief over Tolan's suffering. The drink was pure pulque, and the serpent god gulped it down until his mind unraveled. In his stupor, he bedded his own sister, Quetzalpetlatl, violating every law he'd sworn to uphold. When dawn broke and shame crashed over him, Quetzalcoatl did what no god had done. He sentenced himself to exile. Setting his jeweled city ablaze, he walked east until he reached the sea. There he built a raft of serpents and sailed away, but not before vowing to return one day, fair-skinned and bearded, to reclaim his kingdom. This promise would echo catastrophically centuries later, when the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma mistook Cortez's ships for Quetzalcoatl's prophesied return. What makes this myth so devastating isn't just the fall of a god, but its layers of irony. Quetzalcoatl, who gave humanity life through his blood, was undone by the very substance his people would later offer him in ritual. His exile mirrors the morning stars vanishing at dawn, yet his story birthed a cultural obsession with cyclical time, with endings that double as beginnings. Even now, scholars debate whether his drunkenness was literal or a metaphor for Spanish manipulation of indigenous beliefs. One truth remains: when a god bleeds for you, his scars become your history. Hera's throne wasn't upholstered in silk, it was woven from thorns. As queen of Olympus, her power was absolute, her dignity unassailable, until Zeus's wandering eye left her not just betrayed but humiliated. And if there's one force more terrifying than a god's anger, a goddess's vengeance, take Io, the nymph whose only crime was catching Zeus's fancy. When Hera stormed into the meadow where they rendezvoused, Zeus panicked, transforming Io into a snow-white heifer. But Hera wasn't fooled. With a smile colder than winter, she claimed the cow as a gift and assigned Argus, the 100-eyed giant, to guard her. Day and night, those unblinking eyes watched Io, trampling her hopes of escape. Even when Zeus sent Hermes to slay Argus, Hera turned the knife. She scattered the giant's eyes onto the tail feathers of her sacred bird, the peacock, ensuring Io's torment would never truly fade. Then there was Leto, pregnant with Zeus's twins, Artemis and Apollo. Hera decreed no land beneath the sun could shelter her rival. Leto wandered, parched and exhausted, until the floating island of Delos, a place so barren even Hera's wrath overlooked it, took pity. But the queen's cruelty didn't end there. She sent the serpent Python to hunt Leto, and when labor began, Hera kidnapped Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, to stall the delivery. For 9 agonizing days, Leto writhed under the sun until the other gods intervened. The moment Apollo was born, he avenged his mother by slaying Python. But Hera's lesson was clear: cross her, and even the earth itself would reject you. What's chilling isn't just the scale of Hera's revenge, but its precision. She didn't just punish Zeus's lovers, she weaponized their suffering to wound him. When Semele, another mortal consort, begged to see Zeus in his divine glory, Hera whispered doubts in her ear. What if he's hiding his true form? Zeus, bound by oath, complied, and Semele burned to ash at the sight of his radiance. Yet from her ashes rose Dionysus, the god of wine and chaos, whose cult would forever mock Hera's obsession with order. Yet to dismiss Hera as merely spiteful misses the myth's bitter core. In a world where Zeus's infidelity was as constant as thunder, her wrath was the only weapon she had. Every transformed nymph, every cursed child, was a scream against the double standard that bound her, queen of gods, yet powerless in her own marriage. The Greeks didn't just fear Hera, they understood her. Her temples stood as reminders: divinity doesn't erase heartbreak, and even goddesses bleed. The days were too short. That was the complaint echoing from every fishing canoe, every taro field across Polynesia. The sun raced across the sky like a frightened bird, barely giving mothers time to dry their laundry or fishermen to haul in their nets before darkness swallowed the horizon. Maui, the trickster demigod, watched his people struggle and hatched a plan so audacious even his brothers gasped when he explained it. "We're going to catch the sun," he declared, holding up a rope woven from his sister Hina's hair, each strand infused with her sacred power. Now, lassoing a celestial force wasn't as simple as roping a wild boar. Maui needed more than strength. He needed perfect timing. he and his brothers trekked to the volcano Haleakala, where the sun first touched the earth each dawn. There they wove snares from coconut fiber and waited, their fingers calloused from years of pulling fishhooks from the deep. When the sun's first rays crested the crater's edge, Maui sprang. The ropes snapped taut, the sun's fiery mane tangling in the cords as it shrieked like a seabird caught in a net. "Why do you rush?" Maui demanded, his bare feet braced against the molten rock. "Slow your path, or I'll leave you bound here forever." The bargain they struck reshaped time itself. The sun agreed to crawl across the sky for half the year, granting long, golden days for planting and fishing, then race through winter to warm the other side of the world. But Maui's victory wasn't just about daylight, it was a revolution disguised as a myth. For the first time, humans weren't victims of natural cycles, they were negotiators. The story spread from Hawaii to New Zealand, each island adding its own flourishes. Some say Maui used a jawbone as a hook, others claim his sister Hina's tears softened the sun's heart. What makes this tale endure isn't just its whimsy. Those extended hours of sunlight meant surplus crops, thriving villages, generations fed. The same ocean that carried Maui's legend also carried double-hulled canoes stocked with yams and sweet potatoes, harvests made possible because a demigod taught his people to demand more from the universe. And when you see the sun dawdling on a summer evening, painting the clouds in shades of mango and hibiscus, that's not just physics, that's the lingering glow of Maui's defiance. Loki's laughter often echoed through Asgard's halls, sharp as a blade honed for treachery, but his greatest prank, fathering the very monsters who would one day devour the gods. With the giantess Angerboda, he sired 3 children so terrifying even Odin's blood ran cold when their prophecies were whispered. First came Fenrir, a wolf cub whose playful growls shook the earth like distant thunder. The gods raised him in their halls, blind to the horror taking shape beneath his fur, until the day his jaws could span valleys and his breath scorched the air itself. Next slithered Jörmungandr, the serpent whose coils grew until they circled Midgard, its venom souring the seas. And finally, Hel, whose face was half living flesh, half rotting corpse, destined to rule the dishonored dead in her frozen underworld. The gods reacted not with wrath but strategic cruelty. Odin, ever the chessmaster, hurled Jörmungandr into the ocean's depths, thinking distance would neutralize the threat. He dispatched Hel to Niflheim, gifting her dominion over those who died without glory, a convenient exile disguised as a throne, but Fenrir, the wolf, demanded darker deception. The gods commissioned dwarves to forge Gleipnir, a chain thinner than silk but stronger than hate, woven from impossible things, the sound of a cat's footsteps, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish. When Fenrir balked at being bound, Tyr, the god of war, placed his hand in the wolf's jaws as a pledge of good faith. The moment Gleipnir tightened, Fenrir bit down, severing Tyr's hand, and any pretense of trust between gods and monsters. These weren't just punishments, they were delayed reckonings. Every shackle placed on Loki's children became a knot in the rope of fate, pulling Ragnarök closer. Fenrir's howls would one day shatter Gleipnir, his fangs finding Odin's throat. Jörmungandr's thrashing would flood the earth as it faced Thor in their final duel. Even Hel's quiet realm would empty, her army of the dead marching beneath pale banners. Loki's brood were more than monsters. They were the embodiment of divine consequences, proof that even gods couldn't cheat destiny forever. The Norsemen understood this deeply. No chains, no banishments, no amount of sacrificed hands could stop what had already been set in motion. The children always come looking for their father's debts. The pomegranate seeds glistened like rubies in Hades' palm, 6 tiny pieces of fruit that would chain a goddess to the underworld forever. Persephone hadn't meant to eat them. Kidnapped while picking flowers, dragged into the earth by the god of the dead himself, she'd refused all food in protest, but hunger wears down even divinity. When Hades offered her the seeds, she caved, swallowing them without realizing their power. Consuming food of the underworld meant she could never fully leave it. Up above, her mother Demeter, goddess of the harvest, raged. Crops withered, rivers froze, and the first winter cloaked the world in mourning. Zeus, fearing humanity's extinction, brokered a deal. Persephone would spend 6 months with Hades as his queen, and 6 months reunited with Demeter. Thus the seasons were born, spring's jubilant return when Persephone ascends, autumn's decay when she descends. But beneath this tidy symmetry lies something darker. Persephone's story isn't just a nature myth. It's about the trauma of displacement, the way violence reshapes identity. Notice how the narrative shifts depending on who tells it. To the Greeks, Hades was a villain, though notably never portrayed as abusive. Their marriage grew into one of mythology's most stable. To the Eleusinian Mysteries cult, Persephone's descent symbolized sacred initiation, her dual roles as maiden and queen reflecting life's cyclical depth. Modern retellings often reclaim her as a figure of empowerment, ruling the underworld not as a prisoner but as its sovereign. The pomegranate then becomes not a trick but a choice, a goddess claiming her own throne. Now cross the world to Japan, where another underworld yawns open. Yomi, the land of rotting flesh and suspended time. When Izanami, the creatrix goddess, died giving birth to fire, her husband Izanagi shattered with grief. Sword in hand, he stormed Yomi's gates, bargaining with the shadows for her return. Izanami warned him not to look at her, but in the gloom he lit a torch. The flame revealed her corpse crawling with maggots, her divine flesh putrefying. Horror broke the spell. Izanami became a demon, shrieking vengeance as he fled. She hurled thunder kami spirits after him, forcing Izanagi to block Yomi's entrance with a boulder, severing the living from the dead forever. Both myths grapple with loss, but where Persephone's tale offers compromise, Izanagi's reveals irreparable rupture. The Greeks found rhythm in grief winter ends. The Japanese acknowledged a starker truth: some doors once opened cannot be closed. Izanagi's failed rescue birthed rituals of purification, misogi, while Persephone's duality inspired rites of rebirth. Yet their echoes converge in our own lives. Have you ever tasted something that changed you irrevocably, faced a love so fierce it demanded seasons of separation? These goddesses whisper that descent isn't defeat, it's transformation, and sometimes the underworld keeps its own kind of time. The sun didn't simply rise, it escaped. Every evening, as Ra's golden bark dipped below the horizon, Egypt held its breath, knowing their god-king was descending into the ultimate battlefield. The Duat wasn't just an underworld. It was a gauntlet of fire lakes, inverted waterfalls, and gates guarded by demons who demanded passwords carved into the very flesh of the dead. And waiting in the darkest stretch of the river, coiled like a noose around creation itself, was Apophis, the serpent of chaos, so vast his body scraped the stars when he stirred. His one purpose, to swallow Ra whole and plunge the world into endless night. But Ra wasn't defenseless. His crew was a pantheon of divine muscle and cunning. At the prow stood Set, the storm god, not yet villain but protector. Red-eyed and grinning, he speared Apophis with a harpoon forged from the screams of the unjust, buying precious seconds for the bark to sail onward. Meanwhile, Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, recited spells from the Book of the Dead, his voice stitching bridges of light over pits of oblivion. Even the souls of the deceased played their part, shouting support from the riverbanks like rowdy spectators at a gladiator match. Yet the true hero of this nightly odyssey wasn't a god. It was ritual. Egyptians buried their dead with amulets and papyrus inscribed with Ra's exact route through the Duat, because to know the serpent's name was to weaken him. They chanted hymns at dusk to lend Ra strength, believing the fate of the cosmos hinged on collective belief. In temple murals, Apophis was always depicted bound and stabbed, a visual spell to ensure reality mirrored art. Here's the genius of the myth: it's not just about survival. Ra's journey mirrors the human experience. The 12 hours of night correspond to 12 trials: betrayal, doubt, redemption, each hour a metaphor for life's struggles. When Ra merges with Osiris at midnight, it's a reminder that even gods must die to be reborn. And when dawn finally cracks the horizon, it's not just victory, it's proof that chaos can be held at bay but never destroyed. Apophis will return tonight and every night after, because the price of light is eternal vigilance. So the next time you watch a sunset, remember, somewhere in the unseen depths, a scarred serpent is stirring and a solar bark sails on, powered by the prayers of a civilization that refused to let the dark win. The river high roared like a wounded beast, its waters choked with the bones of villages devoured by Amaterasu. The eight-headed dragon didn't just hunger, it demanded sacrifice. Every year, the terror grew until only one daughter remained in the land of Izumo, Kusanada, whose name meant comb-wreathed maiden, her hair woven with prayers for salvation. Her parents wept as they prepared the feast to placate the beast, stacking sake barrels high enough to drown a man's sorrows. But Susanoo, the storm god exiled from heaven for his reckless temper, saw an opportunity where others saw doom. Drenched in rain and smelling of lightning, he strode into the village with a grin sharp enough to split stone. "Let me marry your daughter," he proposed, "and I'll slay your monster." Desperate, they agreed. What followed wasn't brute force, it was divine theater. Susanoo ordered the sake brewed eightfold stronger, then poured it into 8 colossal troughs, each positioned beneath a gaping maw of the dragon's heads. When Orochi descended upon the feast, its 16 eyes glowed with malice until the alcohol hit. One by one, the heads swayed, drunkenly snapping at each other like quarreling kings. The monster's scaled bellies dragged in the mud, its tails limp as rope. Seizing his chance, Susanoo drew his sword and leapt. Steel flashed like shattered moonlight as he hacked through sinew and spine, the river foaming red beneath his feet. But the greatest surprise lay in the 8th tail. As Susanoo severed it, his blade struck something harder than bone, the legendary Kusanagi note, Tsurugi, a sword born from the storm itself, its edge humming with celestial wind. This wasn't just a hero's tale. The myth explains why Japanese sake ceremonies honor Susanoo, why the imperial regalia includes a sword found in a dragon's tail, and why storms often herald both destruction and renewal. Susanoo, the outcast, became a savior not through holiness, but cunning, a reminder that even the gods must sometimes stoop to trickery to cheat death. And Kusanada, she lived to weave her comb into Susanoo's hair, their union binding human gratitude to divine chaos forever. Freya's beauty was no accident, it was a weapon. The Norse goddess of love, war, and magic wore her power like the falcon-feathered cloak that let her soar between worlds. But nothing compared to Brisingamen, the necklace forged by 4 dwarven brothers in the heart of a dying star. Its golden threads pulsed like captured sunlight, its amber stones whispering secrets only gods could hear. The dwarves, however, weren't interested in gold or glory. Their price, 4 nights with the goddess herself, one with each brother. Freya, ever pragmatic, agreed. To her, desire was currency, and she spent it as deftly as Odin spent his wisdom. The moment she clasped Brisingamen around her throat, Asgard shuddered. Loki, ever the opportunist, slithered into her bedchamber while she slept, shape shifting into a fly to slip between the seams of her defenses. When she awoke to empty air where the necklace had lain, her scream split the heavens, but Odin's response cut deeper. "Find it yourself," he commanded, by setting mortal hearts ablaze. His price, war, not the orderly clashes of shield walls, but the kind of battles where brothers forgot their blood and kings burned their own halls. Only in the chaos of battle could Freya track the necklace's magic, its glow brightest where greed festered. So she rode her chariot pulled by cats across battlefields, half feral with grief, her tears becoming gold where they struck the earth. Warriors who glimpsed her mistook her for Valhalla's Valkyries, but where Odin's maidens chose the slain, Freya claimed the fallen for her own hall, Folkvanga. The dwarves hadn't just stolen a trinket, they'd unleashed a goddess who remembered that love and war are 2 edges of the same blade. the myth's genius lies in its subversion. Freya's shameful bargain. It mirrors Odin's own sacrifices, his eye for wisdom, his flesh on Yggdrasil for runes. Yet where Odin's suffering is framed as noble, Freya's is whispered as if desire somehow taints her divinity. Even Loki's theft reinforces the double standard. The trickster steals Thor's hammer with impunity, but Freya's necklace becomes a pretext to weaponize her. Yet Brisingamen endures not just as a pretty bauble, but as a symbol of agency. Freya didn't beg or weep for Odin's help. She waded into the carnage she'd been ordered to create and emerged with her prize, her dignity, and a lesson for the ages. Beware the goddess who turns the system's rules against itself. Hephaestus limped through the halls of Olympus, his twisted foot leaving uneven echoes against the marble, a sound the other gods had long learned to ignore. Born frail and cast from heaven by his own mother, Hera, for his imperfection, the forged god had spent centuries turning rejection into mastery. His hands shaped wonders, Achilles' shield, Pandora's box, the very thrones the gods lounged upon. But brilliance didn't erase their sneers, and when whispers of his mother's latest ridicule reached his ears, Hephaestus decided it was time to teach Olympus the weight of underestimation. He crafted a throne unlike any other, gilded with trickery, its seams laced with invisible bonds. When Hera lowered herself onto it, the chair clamped around her like a golden vice, its enchantments resisting even Zeus's thunderbolts. The Queen of Gods, trapped by her own son's ingenuity, became a spectacle for the pantheon. Dionysus laughed, Ares fumed, but Hephaestus, watching from his smithy, demanded no gold or apologies. His price was poetic, Aphrodite's hand in marriage, the goddess of love who dripped adoration from her fingertips yet never spared him a glance, would now share his bed. The gods, desperate to free Hera, agreed without consulting her. The irony was exquisite. Hephaestus, the unwanted, had exposed Olympus's shallowest secret. Their vanity outweighed their power. They'd trade a goddess's autonomy to salvage their queen's dignity. Yet the real twist lay in the marriage's aftermath. Aphrodite took Ares as her lover, flaunting their affair until Hephaestus wove an unbreakable net to snare them mid-embrace, dragging the shamed pair before the court. But here's what the myths whisper: Hephaestus didn't rage. He chuckled. He'd known her infidelity was inevitable, just as he knew his true victory wasn't possession but revelation. Every laugh at the trapped lovers was a crack in Olympus's glittering facade. This myth isn't just about revenge, it's about the outsmarting of systems. Hephaestus weaponized his art because it was the only language the gods understood. His throne wasn't just a trap, it was a mirror, forcing immortals to confront their own pettiness. And Aphrodite's betrayal, it proved love, even divine, couldn't be chained, least of all by a marriage forged in spite. The forged god's legacy isn't in the marriages he won or the wars he armed, but in the moments he made the gods squirm, their perfection undone by the one they'd called broken. Before order, there was only chaos, a swirling, screaming tempest of saltwater and rage named Tiamat. The Babylonian mother of all gods didn't just inhabit the void. She was the void, her serpentine body coiled around the unborn universe, her roar the sound of collapsing stars. But her children, the younger gods, grew restless in her shadow. Their whispers of rebellion slithered through the cosmos until Tiamat's patience snapped. She birthed an army of monsters, vipers with fangs of lightning, scorpion men whose tails dripped venom thick as tar, and her champion, Kingu, to whom she gifted the tablet of destinies, the very laws of reality etched into clay. Enter Marduk, the storm god with eyes that could see across eternity. When the terrified gods begged for salvation, he agreed on one condition. "Make me your king," he demanded, "and my word will become law." Desperate, they crowned him in the ruins of their fear. What followed wasn't just a battle, it was the first act of creation. Marduk harnessed the four winds like reins, riding his chariot of thunderclouds straight into Tiamat's gaping jaws. As she lunged, he unleashed him, Hulu, the divine hurricane, bloating her belly with storm until she couldn't close her mouth. Then, with a spear forged from the collective will of the gods, he pierced her heart, splitting her skull like a clamshell. Here's where myth becomes architecture. Marduk didn't just kill Tiamat, he dismantled her. Her corpse became the blueprint of civilization, her ribs the vault of heaven, her weeping eyes the sources of the Tigris and Euphrates, her tail the spine of the zodiac. From Kingu's spilled blood, he needed the first humans, laborers to maintain the cosmos so the gods could rest. And at the center of it all, Marduk raised Babylon, its ziggurats echoing Tiamat's corpse, a monument to order carved from chaos. But the story hides a paradox. Babylon's priests claimed Marduk's victory proved their city's supremacy, yet the epic's oldest fragments reveal Tiamat wasn't evil or just outdated. She was the old world refusing to yield to the new. Every new year, Babylonians reenacted Marduk's triumph, not just to celebrate their god, but to remember that creation is cyclical. Even victory has its price. The monsters Tiamat spawned never truly died. They lurked at the edges of maps, in storms that flattened crops, in plagues that emptied cities. Marduk's order was never absolute, just a fleeting moment between one chaos and the next. So when archaeologists brush dust from Babylonian tablets, they're uncovering more than a creation myth. They're reading a manifesto. Civilization isn't a gift. It's something wrested from the jaws of the infinite, again and again, with every sunrise over the Euphrates. And the next time chaos comes, look to the storm. Marduk's work is never done. The snow never melted on Mount Kailash. Even the wind dared not howl too loudly near its peaks, for this was the domain of Shiva, the destroyer, the ascetic, the god who wore serpents as jewelry and smeared his chest with the ashes of the dead. Parvati, daughter of the mountain king Himavan, had loved him since she first glimpsed him meditating, his matted hair coiled like a nest of shadows. But Shiva hadn't even glanced her way. To win the heart of a god who'd reduced desire itself to cinders would require more than beauty. It demanded annihilation. So Parvati walked into the forest, shedding her silks for barkcloth, her jewels for mud. For 3,000 years she stood on one leg, then for 3,000 more she balanced on her toes, then on just a single toe, her body thin to bone, her skin blackened by sun and storm. Ants built hills in the hollows of her collarbones, scorpions nested in her unblinking eyes, yet still Shiva remained silent, testing her resolve with blizzards that froze her prayers mid-breath and wildfires that licked at her flesh. The other gods whispered that she was mad, but Parvati understood what they did not. To love the destroyer, one must first become destruction, and then the demons came. Unable to tolerate her purity, the Asura Taraka sent armies to defile her penance. That's when Parvati's spine straightened one final time, not in retreat but transformation. Her skin turned midnight blue, her hair exploded into a whirlwind of vengeance, and from her brow sprang Kali, the furious aspect of the goddess. With a necklace of skulls and a tongue lolling like a bloodied banner, Kali didn't just slay the demons, she danced on their corpses, her laughter cracking the horizon. Only when Shiva himself appeared, placing his foot in her path, did Kali still her rage, recognizing in his gaze not fear but respect. Their union wasn't a wedding, it was a cosmic recalibration. When Parvati finally became Shiva's bride, the Himalayas trembled under the weight of their embrace. To outsiders, they seemed opposites, the serene goddess cooling Shiva's fury, the austere god tempering her warmth. But the tantric texts reveal a deeper truth. Parvati and Shiva were two rhythms of the same heartbeat. Her fertility balanced his dissolution, his transcendence grounded her compassion. Together, they birthed Ganesha, the remover of obstacles, whose very existence proved that from destruction, his head severed by Shiva's trident, comes creation, his revival with an elephant's head. Modern Hinduism often softens Parvati into a docile consort, but the myths scream otherwise. She didn't win Shiva by submission, but by matching his intensity first as the ascetic who out-meditated the master yogi, then as Kali, who proved she could wield his destructive power just as fiercely. Their love story is the universe's oldest equation. Creation cannot exist without destruction, just as light cannot exist without the dark it pierces. So the next time you see a Shiva lingam wrapped in Parvati's embrace, remember, it's not a symbol of domination. It's the signature of two forces so vast they had to carve their meeting place into the bedrock of existence itself. Coyote didn't ask for permission, that wasn't his style. The Shoshone people tell of a time when fire belonged only to the selfish fire beings who hoarded its warmth atop a distant mountain while the rest of the world shivered in darkness. Coyote, the trickster with a grin as wide as the horizon, watched the children's teeth chatter and decided enough was enough. He recruited 4 of the swiftest animals, fox, squirrel, frog, and cricket, and hatched a plan so audacious it bordered on comedy. Fox would dash in first, swiping a single ember while the fire beings slept. When they gave chase, Squirrel would take the flame, his bushy tail catching fire as he leaped between trees, scattering sparks like seeds. Frog, ever the showman, would swallow the ember whole and belly flop into a river, the steam from his sizzling back masking his escape. Finally, Cricket, small and unnoticed, would smuggle the last glowing spark to the people in his tiny mouth. The plan worked, sort of. By the time the fire reached human hands, it had burned Fox's tail white at the tip, singed Squirrel's fur into stripes, and left Frog with a permanently scorched throat, which is why the Shoshone say he croaks to this day. But Coyote, he just laughed, dusting off his paws as the fire beings howled in frustration. The myth isn't just about fire, it's about redistribution. Coyote didn't steal for glory, he stole because imbalance offended him, and the burns his friends endured, proof that even the best-intentioned rebellions leave scars. Now cross the ocean to Greece, where another thief faced far graver consequences. Prometheus, whose name means forethought, watched as Zeus condemned humanity to eat raw flesh in the shadows. Unlike Coyote's playful heist, Prometheus's act was deliberate defiance. He smuggled fire from Olympus's forge inside a hollow fennel stalk, its glow hidden like a secret in plain sight. When Zeus discovered the gift flames crackling in mortal hearts, forging tools, cooking meals, his wrath was apocalyptic. He ordered Hephaestus to chain Prometheus to Mount Caucasus, where an eagle would feast on his liver every day, only for it to regrow each night in an endless cycle of torment. The contrasts are striking. Coyote's theft is a caper, a team effort where even failure burned tails, croaking frogs becomes part of the law. Prometheus's crime is a solitary sacrifice, his suffering etched into mythology as the cost of enlightenment. Yet both stories grapple with the same question: who gets to control knowledge? The fire beings and Zeus clutch power out of spite, while Coyote and Prometheus redistribute it at tremendous personal risk. Notice, too, how fire transforms in each tale. For the Shoshone, its warmth and community, shared but messy, carried forward by cooperation. For the Greeks, its technology and civilization, a spark that lifts humanity from savagery but demands eternal vigilance. Perhaps the most haunting difference lies in the endings. Coyote trots off into the next adventure, his mischief rewarded with laughter and a lesson about consequences. Prometheus's fate is a loop of agony, broken only when Hercules finally slays the eagle centuries later. One story winks, the other weeps, yet both whisper the same truth: progress is never free. Whether paid in singed fur or stolen flesh, fire's price is always blood. The courtroom of the gods had never witnessed a feud like this. For 80 years, Horus, the falcon-headed avenger with vengeance in his wings, and Set, the red-eyed storm god who devoured his own brother Osiris, clashed in a battle that blurred the line between justice and farce. Their trial wasn't held in some celestial hall, but across the bloodied marshes and sun-scorched dunes of Egypt itself, each twist more absurd than the last. Take the infamous hippopotamus incident. When the judges demanded proof of strength, Set transformed into a 7-ton beast, lurking in the Nile's depths to capsize Horus's boat. But Horus, ever his father's son, harpooned him only for Isis in a moment of misguided mercy to spare Set's life. Enraged, Horus lopped off his mother's head. Don't worry. Thoth promptly replaced it with a cow's because divine logic is flexible. Then came the lettuce debacle. Yes, lettuce, Set, ever the provocateur, claimed dominance by a hump, planting his seed in Horus through a salad. Ancient texts get creative. Horus retaliated by sneaking his own essence into Set's food, so when the gods summoned their seamen to testify, Set's voice emerged from the Nile reeds, while Horus's shot out of Set's forehead like a divine mic drop. Even the judges facepalmed, yet beneath the absurdity lay a brutal truth. This was about more than a throne. It was cosmic order versus chaos. Set's theft of Osiris's crown had tipped the scales, and every farcical ruling, like the time the gods awarded the kingdom to Set by day and Horus by night, only for Horus to eclipse the sun and claim perpetual rule, was a battle for Mat, the sacred balance. The turning point came when Horus's left eye, gouged out by Set's thumb, was restored by Thoth. Not just healed, transfigured. The Wedjat, or Eye of Horus, became Egypt's ultimate talisman, symbolizing sacrifice and rebirth. Its fractions, a half for the pupil, a quarter for the brow, even dictated ancient measurement systems. In the end, Horus won, not with brute force, but by exposing Set's tyranny as unnatural. Yet the myth lingers because the victory was never clean. Set wasn't destroyed, he was exiled to roar as the desert storm, a necessary counterbalance. And Horus, he ruled, but with a scarred eye, a reminder that even justice leaves wounds. The Wedjat, then, isn't just a pretty amulet. It's the first courtroom gavel, echoing across millennia. Order triumphs, but chaos always lurks in the verdict's shadow. The heavens had never seen a chaos like Sun Wukong. Born from a stone nourished by the cosmos, the Monkey King erupted into existence with a scream that shook the Yellow Springs and a glare so fierce it pierced the Jade Emperor's throne. His first act, storming the underwater palace of the Dragon King to arm himself with Rui Jingu Bang, a staff that could shrink to a needle or stretch between heaven and earth, because why settle for mortal weapons when you can wield a pillar of divine measurement? His second act, scratching his name out of the Book of Death and declaring himself immortal, just to spite the underworld's bureaucracy. By the time he crowned himself great sage equal to heaven, the celestial court had two choices: appease him or admit they were terrified. They tried appeasement first. The Jade Emperor offered titles Keeper of the Heavenly Horses, a glorified stable boy, Guardian of the Peach Garden, until he ate every immortality-granting fruit. Each insult masked as honor only stoked Wukong's rage. When the gods finally moved against him, he didn't just fight, he rewrote the rules of war, cloning himself from plucked hairs, wielding winds that toppled celestial armies, and somersaulting clouds at speeds that left lightning panting in his wake. The Monkey King turned heaven's order into a cosmic joke. Even Erlang Shen, heaven's greatest warrior, only defeated him through trickery, with Laozzi's diamond snare and the combined might of the Taoist pantheon. But the real humiliation came from Buddha. When Wukong boasted he could leap clear of the Enlightened One's palm, Buddha indulged him, then revealed the Monkey King had never left his hand at all. With a single gesture, Buddha transmuted 5 elemental mountains into Wukong's prison, burying him under 500 years of stone and silence. Yet even this wasn't the end. Redemption arrived in the form of Tang Sanzang, the pious monk bound for India to retrieve sacred scriptures. To atone, Wukong became his bodyguard, battling demons with his trademark cocktail of cunning and carnage. What makes this myth endure isn't just the rebellion, it's the subtext. Wukong's defiance mirrors every underdog who's ever slapped the system. His imprisonment isn't just punishment, it's the universe's way of tempering raw chaos into purpose. And his journey west, a masterclass in transformation. the cocky rebel learns humility, the immortal discovers mortality's value, and the trickster becomes a guardian. The staff that once toppled palaces now clears paths for wisdom. Even his iconic golden headband, which tightens when Sansang chants, isn't just a leash. It's a reminder that true freedom isn't absence of restraint, but mastery of self. Modern retellings paint Wukong as a folk hero, but the original text lingers in paradox. He's both invincible and vulnerable, divine and childish, a symbol of resistance and a cautionary tale about ego. His legacy slithers into pop culture from anime to video games, but the core remains. Some rebellions don't just challenge heaven, they force it to grow. And sometimes the loudest laugh in the universe belongs to the monkey who dared to flip it the bird. The ice groaned under Sedna's feet as her father's kayak sliced through the black water, the Arctic wind biting her cheeks raw. She'd trusted him when he promised to ferry her to safety after famine drove them from their village. Trusted him when he said the stranger waiting on the far shore would be a kind husband. But the moment she saw the snarling dog-masked figure with claws for fingers, she knew the truth. She'd been sold to a spirit in exchange for a full hunting sack. When she screamed, her father didn't meet her eyes. He just gripped the back of her parka and hurled her overboard. Sedna clung to the kayak's edge, her nails digging into the wood like talons. Her father's knife came down once, twice, severing her fingers at the knuckles. As she sank, those fingers twisted and swelled in the freezing depths, becoming the first seals, plump, dark-eyed, and teeming with life. But Sedna herself didn't die. The ocean's fury kept her alive, her hair tangling into kelp, her rage crystallizing into icebergs. She settled on the ocean floor, Adlavun's queen, her amputated stumps breeding every creature the Inuit would ever hunt. Walruses from her joints, whales from her size, bearded seals from the strands of her hair. Yet gifts born of betrayal come with thorns. When hunters failed to show respect when scraps of bone or fur polluted the water, Sedna's wrath churned the sea into a frothing maelstrom. Ice caps shattered, winds howled with the sound of her weeping. No paddle could outrun her storms, no harpoon could calm her grief. Only the Angakok, the shamans brave enough to descend into her realm, could soothe her. They'd comb the snarls from her hair with bone needles, singing apologies passed down through generations. If their hands trembled, Sedna would drag them into the abyss. If they persevered, she'd release the animals anew, her severed fingers swimming willingly into waiting nets. This myth isn't just about explaining where seals come from. It's a brutal lesson in reciprocity. Sedna's mutilation mirrors the Inuit's own precarious existence. One bad hunt, one careless waste, and starvation loomed. Her storms weren't arbitrary, they were ecological justice, a deity enforcing balance. Notice, too, how the shaman's role defies Western heroics. They don't slay the monster or steal her treasures. They groom her, they listen, they acknowledge the wound that birthed their bounty. Modern climate change sharpens the tale's edges. When ice melts too fast for seals to pup, when permafrost coughs up long-drowned bones, some elders whisper that Sedna is furious all over again. Her story, like the Arctic itself, refuses to be a parable. It's a living warning. The line between sustenance and sacrifice is as thin as a knife's edge, and the sea never forgets whose fingers feed it. Sedna's rage isn't locked in ancient ice, it pulses through the protests of Inuit activists today, their voices cracking like thinning glaciers under the weight of a warming world. When pipelines threaten to fracture Arctic waters or oil spills stain the hunting grounds of her seals, her story stops being myth and becomes manifesto. Take the fight against seismic blasting corporate ships firing deafening explosions into the ocean to scout for oil, disorienting marine life and scattering Sedna's creatures. Inuit elders call it poking the bear, but really it's combing Sedna's hair with knives. The Angakok's delicate rituals have been replaced by courtroom battles and blockades, where modern shamans wield lawsuits instead of bone needles, demanding the right to hunt without poisoned waters. And then there's permafrost, the frozen archive of the Arctic, now melting to expose not just mammoth tusks but the horrors of colonialism. Unmarked graves of residential school children, crumbling military waste, viruses dormant for millennia. Sedna's ocean floor is coughing up the past faster than it can be mourned, a literal rising of what was buried. Climate scientists chart the data, but Inuit oral histories frame it as Sedna's reckoning. Her storms grow fiercer because the betrayals never stop. When a Greenlandic hunter films himself cutting open a starving polar bear's belly to find it gnawed through plastic bags, the video isn't just ecology, it's prophecy. Sedna's fingers, the seals and walruses, are becoming as thin as the ice they birth on. Yet there's defiance in this unraveling. Inuit artists stitch Sedna into throat-sung punk rock anthems, her face gracing protest banners next to hashtags like #SealYourOil. Teenagers in Nunavut film TikTok dances in traditional sealskin parkas, captioning them, "Sedna's still watching." Even the language adapts. The Inuktitut word for climate change, Silop Asagic Palyaninga, translates to the weather behaving as if unfamiliar with itself. It's not just an environmental shift, it's a spiritual rupture, a world where even the wind forgets its own name. The genius of Sedna's myth is its brutal honesty. Unlike Western eco-parables that promise redemption if we just recycle enough, her story admits some wounds never fully heal. The seals will always bear the scars of her severed fingers. The hunters will always owe a debt. But there's power in that truth. When an Inuit elder tells a room of policymakers that the ocean isn't just rising, it's remembering, she's not begging for sympathy. She's issuing a warning older than borders. Sedna's storms have always been the price of broken promises, and this time the whole world is in the kayak. From the thunderbolts of Zeus to the cunning of Coyote, from the icy depths of Sedna's realm to the celestial rebellion of Sun Wukong, these 25 tales are more than just stories, they're the lifeblood of civilizations. Each one is a mirror held up to the cultures that birthed them, reflecting how our ancestors made sense of the world's chaos. The Greeks saw the changing seasons in Persephone's grief, while the Inuit understood the fragile balance of survival in Sedna's severed fingers. The Akans celebrated intellect over brute force through Anansi's tricks, and the Norse carved their fatalism into Odin's endless pursuit of wisdom. These myths weren't mere entertainment, they were maps of morality, explanations for natural phenomena, and blueprints for living in a universe far stranger than any holy text could contain. What's astonishing is how these ancient narratives still pulse through modern life. The days of the week bear the names of Norse gods: Thor's Thursday, Freya's Friday. Medical symbols slither with Asclepius' serpent, while Hollywood blockbusters retell Hercules' labors with CGI monsters. Even our psychology leans on these archetypes: the trickster, the martyr, the creator, the destroyer, proof that these deities never really left us. They just traded temple altars for movie screens and therapist couches. But here's the real magic: these stories belong to you now. Maybe you see yourself in Hephaestus' resilience, or find comfort in Isis' determination to stitch broken things back together. Perhaps Maui's defiance sparks your own rebellious spirit, or Parvati's transformation reminds you that love can be both tender and fierce. That's the power of myth, it molds itself to whoever holds it. So we turn it over to you. Which of these tales resonated deepest? Did we miss your favorite divine drama? The comment section is your agora, your mead hall, your digital campfire. Share the stories that shaped your world, because every retelling keeps these gods alive. After all, immortality was never about living forever, it's about being remembered. And as long as we keep spinning these threads, the tapestry of the divine will never unravel.